Welcome. We are doing the tutorial here for how to set up algae growth for the term 2 project. All right. So I'm going to go through the materials and then talk about some of the choices you're going to make and sort of the key aspects of what you're going to do. So I've given you guys the sheet. So the materials you're going to have are algae. So I have this large jug of algae. This is from a very not healthy fish tank that I'm growing in the other room, and I've pulled these out. And this jar lives over on the side next to the windowsill, so it constantly gets a supply of light. You'll also notice that there's a dropper in here to be able to draw up and pull, and therefore you can pull sort of a fairly, continuous group of algae so that when you transfer over into your tubes, you can do that pretty easily. I'm probably actually going to set up a second tube very similar to this. My recommendation is that if you draw up from a given tube, and again, I'm going to have this one, I'm also going to have another jug as well. Whichever one, make one your stock, and don't draw from multiple different stocks, because you want to, again, draw from the same stock of algae for all of your samples. So that's the first thing that you have. That's your algae. Fertilizer. We have a couple of different types of fertilizer. We have this, which is a liquid fertilizer. It looks, yes, sort of blue-green, if you will. And so for a lot of people, they're going to use this. And again, I will put a dropper in the top with a bulb so you can drop a fixed amount of this in there. And we also have an NPK separately, but I don't think that's probably appropriate for term 2. But you should know that this is a 10-10-10, meaning 10 parts nitrogen to 10 parts phosphorus to 10 parts potassium in this. All right. The next thing you will need is Falcon Tubes, and this is Falcon Tubes. Technically, they are conical tubes that you put algae in. And so what we'll do, and these are obviously brand new, and I've got a ton of these, you're going to need a total of 12 of these Falcon Tubes. So we will set up some racks that have these tubes in there, and you're going to get a total of 12. Some of the racks are going to be like these broken styrofoam things that have them. And you're going to need 6 of them to be your test and 6 of them to be your control. And I'll come back a little bit to what that means in just a minute, but you're going to need a total of 12 of these tubes in your setup. And then the last thing you guys need is what's known as a colorimeter. And so the colorimeter is something that's going to allow you to pass light through a sample, a 1 milliliter sample, and then get a reading for how much light is able to get through and how much light is going to get absorbed. And real specifically, we're going to be looking for how much light is absorbed, and that's going to be an indirect measurement of the algae population. All right? So your goal here is going to be to set up 6 things that are a control and 6 as a test. Let's start with the control. There's 2 different ways that your group can set up the control. All right. One is that you get 6 tubes and you fill them with water. All right. And then you add the same amount of fertilizer to those water tubes as you add to your tubes that you put algae in. Okay. The other type of control you could do, and by the way, that would be a negative control. Okay. No algae in, just the fertilizer. You wouldn't expect there to be much in the way of growth. That would be ideal. The other alternative is you set up 6 tubes that have just algae and you don't put fertilizer in. Or instead of adding fertilizer, you add extra water so that you have an equal dilution rate. Okay, so let's say I decide that in my experiment, I am going to fill this up with 25 milliliters of algae and 5 milliliters of fertilizer. I don't know if that's the right amount. I'm just picking some numbers out there. My negative control would be 25 mils of water plus 5 mils of fertilizer. Or I would make a positive control, which would be 25 mils of algae and then 5 mils of water. You should do one of those 2 types of control. It is completely up to you. You shouldn't do both, but as a group, you should decide one of those 2. Okay. And then the other thing you're going to do is your test, and your test is adding fertilizer in. So an example I just gave you was 25 mils of algae and then 5 mils of fertilizer, and that's the amount. Is that the right amount to help add in nutrients to cause the algae to grow? I don't know. Okay. Is that going to be so concentrated that I'm going to get not much difference in there? I don't know. Am I going to have to dilute the algae? Maybe what I need to do is do 20 mils of water 5 of algae and 5 of fertilizer, or 20 of water, 4 of algae, 1 of fertilizer. I'm not really sure, okay? I would recommend you pick some numbers and you run this for a week and then see what happens, okay? And the good news is you're going to be able to iterate and make some adjustments, okay? You guys have one of the more open-ended things about this. So here's the question. We've now talked about the independent variable we're changing, right? The independent variable that you're going to change in between here, between the control and your test, is really the fertilizer, right? That's really your thing that you're testing in this case. So how am I going to get my dependent variable? How am I getting my dependent variable? How am I going to find out whether this works or not? And the answer is that's the colorimeter. So whatever afternoon you guys decide to set this up, you're going to set up all your tubes. You're going to label them. You're going to put them in. We're going to have a station along the side near the windows where we're going to have space for enough people to set this up, and they're going to go for some amount of time. And then on that day, you will use one of the little bulb pipettes, like what we were using today. You'll use one of these little bulb pipettes, and you're going to draw from the tube that you have. Each tube, you will draw up 1 milliliter out of that tube, and you will put it into a cuvette, and that's what these are, that you've cleaned the sides down, and you're going to put it in here, and you're going to drop it into your colorimeter. You're going to make sure that the colorimeter has a few different things that are going on. One is you're going to make sure that we calibrate it, which means we're going to put in a cuvette that has just water in it first, just to make sure it's all set. And then you're also going to be reading how much light goes through at the 635 nanometer amount. 635 nanometers is the wavelength of light that should be able to pick up the algae in it. Okay, and by the way, that's on here, and I'll make sure that I have a mark of tape on the one that says use this as our reading. So you're going to be figuring out the amount of light that is absorbed as it goes through at that wavelength, and you're going to read on your LabQuest a number of how much light's absorbed for each of your 6 tests. You're also going to do it for each of your 6 trials. So every day that you collect data, you're taking 12 data points, okay? 6 of your control, 6 of your tests. And I'll have 2 stations set up in here. And then you'll come back some number of days later. I wouldn't make it like 100 days because, you know, the experiment's going to be over by then. I would pick like 2 or 3 days and see what happens. After 2 or 3 days, you come back. Maybe you wait a week. Maybe the first time you do it a week and say, what happens over a week? You come back after a week and then repeat it and see what has been your change from the readings you got the first time to that 1 week time. So if you wanted to set it up Monday or Tuesday next week, you could come back after the Thanksgiving break on Monday or Tuesday, run this again and say, all right, what kind of growth do we get from algae in our tubes when they expose to light? And we've done all this setup. And then you could get some initial data. And let's say like everything's dead, okay? You probably added too much fertilizer, okay? That would be one read theirs. Or it could be like so dark that the numbers are off if everything is absorbed, if it's like completely packed, then you added too much algae to start and you didn't get the read. For most of the groups, I'm expecting you guys to have to do 2 trials. Some of you guys will get one group will get totally lucky. You'll nail it down, you'll luck it out completely there. The good news is you live in the future and you have the internet. And this is actually not that complicated a lab, so you could look up like how might I want to set up my ratios for algae growth and that sort of stuff and see if you find some guidance there about how to set it up. You will have more than enough time to do 2 or 3 iterations of this, even if you wait until after Thanksgiving break to come back and do that, okay? I don't know how long you're going to want to run. I would guess that nobody's going to need to run the growth more than a week to get reasonable growth. If you set it up and it seems like it's working and you want to collect for more data than that, you absolutely can, but you're probably going to want to do at least 2 runs between now and when the project's over. All right? Are there any questions from you guys about the setup? Yes?
Do we restart growing the algae after the first week?
So if you were doing a separate experiment, yeah, you can go back, you could dump these out, rinse them out, and then reset it, and then go back to our stock solutions again and start again. But it is important, again, to get a fresh starting algae growth your first time to know what's going on. Okay? Yes?
Should we come after school, or is there a time like during class or something?
So unfortunately, this room is pretty much packed, and I don't know that we're gonna have class time set aside. So there will be class. This room should be available 7:30 in the morning, pretty much every day. Okay, and it should be available most days after school until at least 3:30 for people to run there. And again, my plan is to set up 2 stations for data collection over on the side, and I will be here certainly Tuesday after school next week for people who are looking to set things up. The first time around, okay? And then I'll be here after Thanksgiving break, probably the first few days right afterwards, helping people set up. So if you want some extra help.
Every time we do a new test of like the ratio between water and fertilizer and algae,
Mhm.
we should have one control like this amount of algae and water without any fertilizer, and then
Yes.
okay, so
Yeah. Every time you reset your tubes, you should reset your controls and have a new set of controls.
okay,
You should set your controls up with your test at the exact same time.
okay.
So for measurements, we'll take an initial measurement once everything's set up, and then we'll wait time,
Mhm.
and then take it again.
That's it. Yeah. And I don't know that you're going to need to take lots of readings this first time. Our goal here for this experiment is to be able to pick a variable, test a variable, and collect data. And that sounds like a super simple thing, but like science has a way of being totally messy. And you will screw things up that I haven't even thought of. So that's how you learn. That's like really how you learn those practice skills in there. And so as I said, I'm expecting everybody to have to reiterate a couple of times. Okay. All right. Any last questions? All right. I have a room of approximately 30 students here. It's a snow day with a late start. School ended half an hour ago. What's wrong with you people? Like seriously, like it's Friday. It's snowing out. You guys are so dedicated. No, thanks. And again, I will be around. Mr. Dempsey will be around. Mr. Giovanni, they'll be around for a while. So we'll help you guys get set up. So hopefully you guys go have a safe weekend, and I'll help you guys set up next week.